Summoned minions will die more often? Summoned minions will die more often. More. As in they'll be weaker? Bold strategy, Cotton. All right, let's talk about it. Diablo 4 Open Beta Retrospective Transforming Feedback into Change. After the early access and open beta weekends concluded, dev team read through all the feedback and reviewed gameplay data. Using this information made a variety of fixes and updates to various systems, all of which will be present in the version of the game that launches on June 6th. Dungeon layouts. One of the most common pieces of feedback we received is that players felt they were doing a lot of backtracking within certain dungeons. We have optimized multiple dungeons across all zones to minimize the need for backtracking. Here is a list of dungeons specifically in the Fractured Peaks, which received layout updates. I did most of my early leveling in Mallwood, and basically there were like 2 layouts in Mallwood that had this one little section where it took a split in the road, but the splits diverged. Like they didn't reconverge later in a place that really made sense. They were so far out of the way that the majority of all the content was on this side. And then there was a small little sliver over here that like could have spawned an elite monster. So you had to go back there and check. But in general, what you really need to take away from here is that they looked at all dungeons. These are just the ones that we've already seen. So first and foremost, legitimately, if this is all they said right now, we have alleviated 80% of the complaints that I saw online and on Reddit since this launched. So this is massive. Let's read dev notes. Our primary goal with the layout changes was to reduce certain kinds of backtracking, which detract from a player's experience. An example of this change is that players previously needed to enter side rooms to interact with structure objectives, causing them to retread the same path. Now, many of our structure objectives have been repositioned along main dungeon pathways, making them easier for players to reach and allowing them to readily explore the dungeon after defeating the structure. I like that. Dungeon events. A chance for an event to spawn inside of a dungeon has increased from 10 to 60%? What? How many times did we fight the Butcher? We fought the Butcher maybe 3 times over the weekend. You're telling me that six times more likely to hit the Butcher? That is very cool. Now, obviously, it's not only specifically the Butcher, right? There are loot goblins. There was a Butcher. There were, I assume this includes Cursed Chest, Cursed Shrine, Cursed Health Well. Perhaps those are included in dungeon events. Running dungeons over and over and over and over and over again are going to get tedious. Like, no matter how difficult you make them, they're going to get tedious at some point. And just throwing in a random event, just like giving me something to do while it's happening, I really like that. Dungeon gameplay. To reduce the need to backtrack, small number of strangling monsters will seek out the player to help complete the kill all monsters objective. Yes. Thank you. Oh, this was my biggest issue. That was absolutely my biggest issue with the dungeons in general, was when you had to kill all. One of the things that was such a big problem is that, like, in the instances where there were ghost monsters spawning, they wouldn't initially show up on the map. They would spawn in after some trigger in a room, and I'd already be running past. The thing I'm interested to see is if the distance is big enough, and if the AI is like smart and fast enough, whether or not you could just dash to the end of a dungeon and then sit there AoEing in like a kill hole or in a kill slot, like in a doorway, and then just have all the monsters basically walk towards you. When Animus is gathered, the player and nearby allies will gain 10 resource and reduce all active cooldowns by 1 second. Interesting. You are picking up this like essence of powerful monster and it's rejuvenating you. I don't even know if this is like answering or a solution to a pain point, or if it's just more inline and thematic. Either way, I like it. Depositing Animus channel time was reduced from 3 to 0 seconds. Thank you. That's so much better. Time to rescue was reduced from 3 to 1.5 seconds. That's also huge. All rescue objectives now drop a health potion upon completion. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Making the game a little bit easier. I don't mind that necessarily. While carrying ancient statues, bloodstone, mechanical box, stone carving, you will receive 25% movement speed to you and nearby allies. I don't know if that completely resolves the issue that I see, which is just let me pick up 2. But I like the fact that I'm gaining movement speed. And for builds like the Necromancer who just don't have movement speed, just straight up do not have it unless you are specifically a darkness build. And even then it's for a very short period of time. Running a dungeon that says you are going to run a lot, so we're going to make the running less of a chore. I like that. Pedestals have their channel time reduced down to 0 seconds. Thank you. Let me just pick it up and put it down. Let me just take it and put it where it needs to go. Returning a portable object, one of these, to its pedestal now fully restores health, resource, potions, and resets cooldowns. Let me read the next 2 and then let's talk about that. All doors will now generate a minimap ping when they are opened. That's interesting. And all structure objectives, so these are like go destroy the thing, and dungeons now have additional combat mechanics players must overcome. I like that. You kind of walked up, you started doing damage, then monsters kind of spawned in. When you got close to the end, an elite spawned. That's kind of like, eh. It kind of doesn't matter how cool the thing looks. It's just like do damage to it and then kill the monsters. I like that they have additional combat mechanics. I wonder what they'll be. Like, they will have thorns damage on them would be really cool. They would slow you when you hit them would be cool. Like something in that nature. While our dungeons offer a variety of objectives to complete, player feedback stated that the action of completing each objective felt tedious. It did. We hoped that providing bonuses such as the increased mobility while carrying certain objectives will streamline and vary the experience of completing objectives. This adjustment is merely starting point, and we intend to extend this philosophy to keys in a future update. So 1, this means if you like made a mad dash and you weren't fighting everything, right? Made like a mad dash to the pedestal and you drop the object. Now you get full healed. Now you can turn around and finish off the monsters. That's interesting. Another way that I see this though is, so they already have like the life well before a boss room. This to me sounds like opening up an option to say, okay, you got the 2 things. You've now unlocked the second part of the dungeon. The moment you walk into the second part of the dungeon, it's going to be a bloodbath. Because if you're willing to fully restore me my health, resource, potions, and reset all my cooldowns, I should be ready for an immediate fight at my maximum capability, which I personally like. I like the idea of I've done the objective, I open up the doors, and it's just like chaos. I'm not saying they're doing that, but putting this in here foundationally before the game starts, before the game launches, means that they could do that. Classes, in general, effects like stun and freeze can be applied to elite monsters twice as long before they become unstoppable. Did elite monsters become unstoppable after being CC'd at first? I did not notice that. I did not notice. If that was happening, I didn't notice that. That's cool. I like it. Reviewed class skills to confirm that all classes have access to sufficient skills that remove control impairing effects. So the Necromancer only has Blood Mist for control removing effects. If the idea is that every class will have 1, they had already succeeded at that. What they mean is reduce the effectiveness of some classes that were like overly powerful in it, i.e. Barbarian? I don't know. I assume this means like most skill trees look pretty different, or some skill will get changed per tree to add unstoppable. Many legendary powers have had updates to their effectiveness. Huh. Interesting. So, you know what? Screw the data mines. The data mines, I doubt that update has gotten pushed. We won't see that until game launches. So makes it even harder to theory craft, but that's also very cool. I like that. There were some legendary aspects where I kind of felt like, sure, they're here, but like, why do I care? Oh, that's actually kind of interesting. This is a slight nerf. There was, I think it was called the Tacticians. I forget which legendary aspect it was, but it said that your crowd control effects are longer and you deal 50% increased damage to monsters who are unstoppable. If an elite monster is not considered to be unstoppable for twice as long as they normally would, you won't get that damage spike against them. That's interesting. That's kind of a weird little slant nerf. No question. So Barbarian, this is a thing where like I was immediately confused. A flat 10% passive damage reduction has been added to the Barbarian class. Some skill tree passives had their damage reduction effects reduced to compensate. Oh, okay. I had not read the second part. If you didn't watch Woody's video covering the fact that basically the Barbarian could have permanent uptime of damage reduction on a shout, for all intents and purposes, that is almost certainly what they are touching on here. And to compensate, they have base damage reduction added to their class, which they just didn't need. I'm sorry, they literally didn't need this, but whatever. But some of the skills have been wrangled. We'll have to see like what the numbers look like. Whirlwind skill now deals more damage and consumes more fury. Interesting. Okay, I think that's fine. I'd rather do more damage more quickly, for sure. Double swing skill enhancement refunds its full fury cost when used on stunned or knocked down enemies. That's also very cool. I like that. Druid companion skills will now deal heavily increased damage. Okay. All ultimate skills have had their cooldowns reduced. Also very good. Usability improvements have been made to maul and pulverize. I wonder what that means. Using a non-shape-shifting skill will transform a druid back into their human form. I don't know if that's strictly a buff or a nerf. It kind of has like gameplay style interactions. I'll have to talk to Teo about this one. Summoned minions will die more often? Summoned minions will die more often. More. As in they'll be weaker? Bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see how that plays out for him. Yeah, get him. Summoned minions were way too strong. Can I draw /S in the air? Jeez, really? I was already I've already hit the maximum capacity for utilization on corpses. I've exceeded corpse production. That really depends on how they've implemented it. Because if it's a reduction in, I don't think it's a reduction in base stats. I would not be surprised if they've just added a damage modifier on monsters versus minions. Like just a unit modifier. Because if it's a stats thing, you could theoretically overcome it with making a tankier Necromancer build. You could theoretically overcome it that way. If it's not just a unit modifier, and it's just a drastic reduction in like life and defense, like life armor res, or they receive a smaller percentage from the Necromancer, I desperately need to know how this has been implemented, because it really comes down to like, how can you build a Necromancer to compensate for it? What do you mean requiring players to utilize corpses more often? Is this in an attempt to stop people from using corpse explosion? I don't know who's telling Blizzard that the Necromancer is too strong, but please stop. You're gonna screw the class. Many bonuses in the Book of the Dead have had their stats increased. Thank you. Yes, very good. Auto-sacrifice all minions on Necromancer. You made it very easy. Auto-sacrifice all minions. I was already going to do it anyways, except on Sever, and maybe an Army of the Dead build. The damage dealt by corpse explosion skill has been reduced. That's fine. That's fine. That makes complete sense. Base skill damage was 75% on an AoE skill that got increased radius as an enhancement. I think that's reasonable. It brings it more in line as a free resource skill. I don't think they had to do this, but I get the fact that they did it. And then literally the most important update they made, the brightness of skeletal warriors and mages has been reduced. Thank you. They looked like cartoons. I'm sorry. I think they looked very cool. I actually didn't hate how they looked. I hate how they looked in comparison to the rest of the game. Rogue upgrades for subterfuge skills have had their bonuses increased. Cool. Multiple passive skills have had their bonuses increased. Cool. All imbuement skills have had their cooldowns increased. Interesting. I'll have to talk to Woody about how influential that is. Sorcerer. Sorceress. They forgot the ESS. Charge bolt's damage was increased and mana cost cast was decreased. Okay. Decreasing the damage of chain lightning and reduced its effectiveness against bosses. Weird. Well, not weird. I get it. Decrease the cooldown for the incinerate skills enhancement bonus. Firewalls will now spawn underneath enemies more frequently when using its enchantment bonus. Cool. Increase the lucky hit chance for the meteor skill in enchantment bonus. Okay. Whenever we introduce changes to our classes, it is with the goal of making both them and their skills feel impactful and powerful. That's why we nerfed a bunch. Sorry. Whenever we introduce changes to our classes, it is with the goal of making both them and their skills feel impactful and powerful. So we nerfed Corpse Explosion and minions die faster, and we nerfed a bunch of skills, and the Barbarian got a buff. Cool. Your feedback has helped us uphold this ideal. Some players have adeptly noticed that certain skills were too powerful. Absolutely. One of our goals for skills is to have them be interesting to wield and interactive in terms of itemization and combat feel. Made some changes to help in its regard, with one example being the Necromancer's minions. We've made a change that makes them vulnerable in combat, which will make raising the dead a more active component of the Necromancer's gameplay. Launch is just the first step of our class balance journey, and you can expect further updates that iterate on this pillar of Diablo 4. I was using Raised Skeleton 2 times per fight on non-boss monsters. I was actively using the raised skeletal, the raised skeletal priest portion of your minions was already like a near constant annoyance that you had to do to maintain maximum uptime. And I wasn't even necessarily sure that doing it, unless you were going for like consuming corpse mana battery build, even made it worth it to do the animation. Mark my words. Everybody out there, mark my words. Summons were too weak in the beta and do not have the scalability of other skills. And this was an unnecessary arrow to the knee. Mark my words. If it turns out I was wrong, if they are just like perfectly balanced in the end game, you know what? I cannot see the future. I cannot prophesize everything, but there was no universe where they needed a nerf. And the stuff you were seeing in the beta was slightly overtuned because we were overpowered. That's it. I like the act of casting summon. No one playing a summoning class ever. That is too real. That is actually too real. No one's like, hold on, wait a minute, Diablo. Let me summon up some skeletons. Okay, I'm ready. Oh, you one-shot them? Dang it. This sure increased my sense of decision making and cost benefit analysis. Damn, dude, I don't know. This is wild. For the UI, fixed an issue where the built-in screen reader was not reading key prompts, game option details, and other UI text. Cool. Accessibility, I'm all about it. Fix an issue where actions cannot be bound to the mouse wheel. Oh, force move on mouse wheel? Can we talk about force move on mouse wheel? For all of you plebeian, all of you Philistine keyboard and mouse players, you lesser gamers than us controller players who had directional sticks. Fix an issue where evade couldn't be bound to the right analog stick on controller. Chat will now display on the left side of the screen. Yes. Why was chat on the right side of the screen? Like, why? A character's stats will be displayed by default when players click the materials and stats button within their inventory. Thank you. Thank you. That's dope. The move and interact inputs can now be mapped. Now give me the ability to have it auto expanded. Let me click a by default auto expanded on character stats. The move and interact inputs can now be mapped to one button while the primary attack input is mapped to a secondary button. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This was a big problem on controller since everything was mapped to A on an Xbox controller, right? So I would be sitting there trying to attack a monster, but because there was loot on the ground, half of my inputs were going to trying to pick up the loot. But if I was full in my inventory, the items would just flip. So I would try to attack, then try to pick up an item. It would flip through the air so I couldn't target anything. So I would try to attack and then I would try to pick up the item. Like, I love this. I would map interact to right analog press if I could, I think. The sans serif font used in game has been replaced with a new serif font. Encounters. Fix multiple issues that allowed bosses like the Butcher to become unresponsive. That's awesome. Sometimes the Butcher just kind of sat there. That's cool. Butcher has been reevaluated for difficulty and will present a greater challenge in World Tiers 3 and 4. That is also sick, considering I smashed a Butcher fight on the Necromancer in like 5 seconds. And I was not even min-max. Like, I just kind of walked up and hurt his feelings. I think it actually made it into one of their hype videos. He just walked up and I just downed him. So I like this. I like the fact that he will rank up in difficulty. I wonder if he'll get like new attacks or if it's just damage reduction boost or something. Bosses such as Short, Malnog, Vaynard, and others were reevaluated for melee character difficulty, resulting in changes to attacks and fight mechanics. Interesting. Cellars. Increase the chance for a dungeon event to occur in a cellar. Dope. That's cool. I wonder if it's by the same percentage. Like, since dungeon events went from 10% to 60%, I wonder if, you know, half of the cellars I walk into will either have a goblin or the butcher or a special event I need to activate. Cellars will now consistently reward a chest upon completion. That's cool. Sometimes you kind of just walked in and they did nothing. Fix an issue where cellars would prematurely be marked as complete. That was funny. Woody has a great video where, like, he's just running around trying to test out Hydra, I think it was. And it's just like, you've completed the cellar. And he's like, what does that mean? Fix an issue where the guaranteed elite monster would be absent from a cellar. Okay, that's cool too. Yeah, sometimes they felt very empty, so I like this. General quality of life. Fix an issue where players could increase attack speed by move canceling attacks. Thank you. Let's also talk about the fact that I could interrupt the action flag of skills by move canceling. So I hope that's also just kind of fixed in this. I could literally target a monster with hemorrhage and then begin running the other direction, and it would not actually trigger the effect of hemorrhage. I was interrupting the action flag. Fix an issue where characters weren't immune and untargetable after loading into an area. Okay, cool. Reset dungeon button has been disabled. What? What? Excuse me? So when you fully complete a dungeon and leave, is the dungeon reset naturally? Meaning I have to kill the dungeon boss. I thought this legit meant like a number of dungeons per day. But if you complete a dungeon and it resets when you leave, I'm fine with that. I mean, it's still not quality of life. I think this is like honestly, this should be in dungeon gameplay with a full explanation. Now that I'm done freaking out. So when does the dungeon reset if I don't complete it? I walk into a dungeon, right? I walk into a dungeon. I'm clearing it. I'm in Nightmare Dungeon, whatever. I'm clearing it and I hit a monster type I can't kill. So I have to leave the dungeon. When does it reset? This needed a whole write-up. You can't just say this, guys. I'm sorry. This is like a massive gameplay loop. And just saying the reset dungeon button has been disabled. Like, this could be a completely like small and innocuous thing, and it's just like, oh, like mid-dungeon you just can't do it, so if you leave and come back in, it resets the dungeon for you, which is basically just multiple steps to be able to do this. We've been stuck on it for too long. I mean, there's only one other thing. Fix an issue that caused Gale Valley and the Serric Rapture to have less monsters than intended until the campaign quest in those territories was completed. Okay, cool. Cool, areas are relevant even if you haven't done the campaign quest. Cool. Tune in on the 20th, April 20th, 420. Just Blaze. Joe Shelley, Joe Papora, Adam Fletcher, along with my boy Riker. Let's go. Hey folks, Riker here with another gaming news update. That's awesome. Okay, there was a lot here.